There's always a lingering doubt when you're pushed to take desperate steps. What choices could I have made to avoid this mess? What actions could have stopped me from ending up here? I couldn't help but feel that my options were running out. How do you make someone realize their actions could ruin everything they hold dear? You can't force them to see it. All you can do is sit back and watch the damage unfold. That's exactly where I found myself. My wife, Sarah, was convinced that what she was doing would bring us closer, that it would prove how deep and meaningful our love was. But to me, it looked like the opposite. Her selfishness on full display, an indication of just how little she truly cared. I'm just a regular guy with a regular life. I'm not some heroic, romantic figure. Like anyone, I've got my flaws. I can be too wrapped up in my own head. I work too much, and sometimes I lose my temper over things that don't really matter. It's not deliberate. It just happens. I'm human. Life has a way of throwing obstacles at you, disrupting everything. But hey, that's life, right? Sarah and I had been married for 19 years. We'd had our fair share of good times, intimate moments 2 or 3 times a week. It was always great, and we both looked forward to more whenever we had the chance. Of course, other things sometimes got in the way. Football, books, TV shows, or just the usual day-to-day responsibilities of being parents. But we always made time when it mattered, or when the desire struck. Everything was going well. Our marriage, our finances, and our 2 daughters, Emily and Sophia, aged 16 and 14, who brought us so much joy. While I might have considered myself average, they were the extraordinary ones. Life was humming along until Sarah decided to introduce some new ideas into the mix. She started calling our sex life boring and suggested we try something more exciting. Even though I was happy with things as they were, I went along with it just to keep the peace. At first, it was all about experimenting with new positions, which I didn't mind. Hell, I'm in decent shape, so it was fun for a while. But soon enough, the novelty wore off. Then came the whole role-playing phase, which I couldn't for the life of me understand. Was this something she saw in a magazine, or a suggestion from a friend? Maybe a scene in some ridiculous TV show? We tried it a few times, and it was fun at first, but after a while it just felt awkward. Trying to focus on my hot wife while pretending to be Leonardo DiCaprio, or remembering she was supposed to be Scarlett Johansson, became more trouble than it was worth. I eventually drew the line, and when I did, she wasn't exactly happy about it. She asked me when the last time I went out on a date was. I reminded her that just last Friday, I'd taken her to that Italian restaurant she wanted to try. We'd gone to the movies after, and her mom had kept the girls overnight. She'd even pointed that out herself, but then she clarified. She didn't mean with her, she meant, when had I last gone out with someone else? I asked if she was implying something, but she quickly reassured me that she wasn't accusing me of anything. Then she asked if I remembered the name of the last girl I went out with, other than her. Of course I did. Her name was Caroline, and it had been about 2 weeks after I met Sarah. We'd had a huge argument about that date. When she asked if I ever missed Caroline, I laughed and said, God, no. I thought back to how miserable dating had been. It wasn't the date itself. I mean, it was fine, but everything leading up to it? Terrifying. Mustering the courage to ask a girl out, worrying she'd turn me down, those awkward first moments. It was like pulling teeth. Then she asked what had triggered these thoughts. I explained that I was just wondering if she'd ever feel like going out on a date with someone else. She assured me she never had. In fact, she recalled being pretty upset when I'd gone out with Caroline, reminding me that we had agreed to be exclusive. I agreed, telling her I felt the same way. If I'd thought otherwise, I never would have proposed to her in the first place. Being married, I said, means you don't go on dates with anyone other than your spouse. She dropped the subject after that, and I didn't hear anything more about it for a while, about a month. In fact, it was a Friday night when things took a strange turn again. We just finished having sex. No gimmicks, no role-playing, just us. A husband and wife, enjoying each other's company. I came twice, and she probably climaxed half a dozen times. We were lying there, basking in that post-coital bliss when Sarah brought up something that threw me off. She casually mentioned that Lily, a woman from her work, had been looking at me that night and suggested that maybe I should ask her to dance. Lily wasn't a stranger. She was a friend of Sarah's. I told Sarah it was flattering, but made it clear that I only wanted to dance with her. Sarah, though, told me that she had told Lily I wouldn't be jealous if I did ask her to dance. I reiterated that it was sweet of her, but I had no intention of asking Lily to dance. That's when Sarah asked if I'd be jealous if she danced with another man. I tried to brush it off with a joke, suggesting her brother would be fine to dance with, but she didn't laugh. She clarified that she'd never had an issue with dancing with guys as long as they were respectful and kept their hands to themselves. Then she asked if there was anyone at the event I wanted to dance with. I told her I didn't remember anyone asking me, and she seemed to accept that. Still, I could feel that something wasn't right. I had no idea where this conversation was heading, but I didn't like it. Doubting that I'd be able to sleep, I got up and retreated to the den to play a video game. Sarah came to the door and stood there for a moment, watching me, but I didn't meet her gaze. After a while, she went back to bed, and I eventually joined her once she had fallen asleep. Things stayed quiet for the next couple of months, until Hannah's promotion party at the Blake Rhino. The place had a great band, and we all ended up in a big circular booth. Sarah was chatting with Lily Carter when she casually mentioned that Lily wanted to dance, asking if I could be a gentleman and join her on the dance floor. I remembered our conversation from 2 months ago and immediately felt the tension building up. I liked Lily. She was friendly, easygoing, but dancing with her wasn't exactly high on my list. The idea of her lush body pressed up against mine made me uncomfortable, but I wasn't sure how to turn her down without making things weird. I enjoyed dancing, but I wasn't as confident about my moves, especially next to someone like Lily, who moved with the grace of a big cat. Stuck in a position with no easy out, I finally stood up and mentioned that I thought our song was starting. Lily smiled and joined me, her brown thighs peeking out beneath her short blue dress. As the song came to an end, the band switched to a slow number, and I couldn't help but wonder why now. Lily fit against me perfectly, her bust pressed against my chest, her dark curls almost brushing my face. She smelled great, and when she looked up at me, her big brown eyes were like deep pools of liquid, her teeth flashing white against her dusky complexion. She wasn't very dark, more like a coffee with cream kind of shade. After the dance, she thanked me and reminded me that Sarah had said I wouldn't mind dancing with her. I complimented her dancing, but I told her honestly that I did mind. I liked her as a person. She was one of the sweetest women I knew, but I explained that dancing with her just didn't sit right with me. She giggled and assured me I was safe with her, adding that if I weren't married, she'd be all over me. Still, she said, friendship was more important, and we could just enjoy that one dance. I gave her a brief squeeze, and we wrapped up the song. When we returned to our booth, Sarah was gone. I looked around and finally spotted her in a black and white dress, laughing and leaning into some young Nordic-looking guy on the dance floor. His hands were definitely wandering lower than they should have been. Sarah caught my eye, gave me a smile, and waved as if everything was fine. I was furious that she had set me up with Lily just so she could dance with that idiot. I tossed a couple of 20s onto the table, stood up, and started heading for the exit. Lily saw me leave and ran after me. I stopped and she, breathing a little heavier, asked where I was going. I told her we were being played. Sarah had been talking about dating other people, asking me if I'd ever thought about it. This whole thing was just a setup. She got me to dance with Lily so she'd have an excuse to go off and dance with this guy. Lily asked me if I was really just going to leave Sarah behind like that. I told her, flat out, I was leaving. She grabbed my arm, looking guilty, and apologized. I reassured her, saying I didn't like being played any more than she did. She asked if I'd take her back to my house so she could get her car. As we were almost home, my phone buzzed, but I ignored it. Lily shot me a glance when her own phone rang. She picked it up and answered it. She told Sarah they were almost at my place and that it wasn't her idea. She didn't want to be left stranded and warned Sarah not to put her in that position again. Lily ended the call and told me that Sarah wanted me to go back and get her. I sighed and said that what I really wanted was a wife who didn't play these stupid games. I couldn't believe we were here, in this mess. Lily explained that it had all come from Heather at work. Heather had been talking about open marriages, claiming it made their sex lives better. Apparently, Heather and her husband, Roger, hardly spoke anymore and spent most of their time trying to involve their friends in their mess. Sarah had fallen for it, and Lily thought Sarah was trying to set us up. I was shocked when Lily said that Sarah had told her she loved me and had always been attracted to me. That hit me like a ton of bricks, and I nearly choked on my words. I apologized for the awkward situation. Lily then reassured me, saying she found me attractive, but she was a one-woman kind of girl. She didn't share. She told me there was no reason for her to apologize. She had nothing to do with what Sarah had done. Then she added, I had the chance to dance with my dream man, and I have no regrets about it. I promised her I'd fill her in on what happened, and then she drove off in her car. Back at home, I paused for a second, then started moving my stuff from the master bathroom into the guest room. I grabbed my work things too and put them there, locking the door behind me. Then I went to sleep, the drinks I'd had earlier probably helping me pass out. I was half awake later, hearing the slam of the door downstairs followed by footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob to my room twisted a few times, and then there was a tap on the door. I could hear Sarah's stage whisper, careful not to wake the girls, asking what was going on. She kept tapping and whispering for about 10 minutes, and then her footsteps retreated, probably to our bedroom, or what used to be our bedroom. Strangely, I found I didn't like the bed in the guest room. I tried to slip out of bed before she woke up, but if that was some coward's plan, it didn't work. I failed. She came downstairs while I was packing up files into my briefcase. I could feel her eyes burning into me as she spat out, clearly angry. What the hell is wrong with you? I shot back coldly, maybe you should be asking yourself that question. Her voice escalated. What's that supposed to mean? I grabbed my briefcase, locking eyes with her. Everything I do is a reaction to what you've done, I said, trying to keep my calm. I didn't want to look at her right then. I was this close to being permanently pissed off. Get your act together, check off your little list, and be ready to talk when I get back. I'm picking up the girls and taking them to my mom's place so we can figure this out. Her face drained of color, and she feigned ignorance. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, then tried to cover it up with a lame excuse. Maybe I have plans for tonight. I shrugged. It's up to you. If you want to fix what's broken, you need to stop making excuses and be ready. But if you're fine with the way things are, do whatever you want. I finished by telling her, move your stuff to the spare bedroom. I like my bed, and you're not welcome in it anymore. She puffed herself up, but I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there. I picked up the girls from school, and they were more than happy to go over to Noah's for the evening. I filled Mom in on what was going on, how Sarah and I were having problems and needed some space. She hugged me tight and told me she loved me, which was a relief. At least I didn't have to answer a million questions right now. When I got home, Sarah was there, waiting for me. She'd baked cookies, oatmeal ones with chocolate chips and M&Ms, and set a plate out with a cup of coffee. I almost didn't know how to react. She stood up, clung to me for a moment, kissed my cheek, and sat down beside me on the sofa. I grabbed a cookie, but I wasn't in the mood for a snack. This wasn't a good start. I knew I had to address what had happened. I turned to her, the frustration building again. Last night was unacceptable, I said flatly. What you did wasn't just hurtful to me. It was embarrassing, disrespectful to both of us, and to see who's supposed to be your friend. Sarah struggled to make eye contact and mumbled an apology. I could tell she wasn't really sorry. She was just trying to smooth things over. I paused, looking back at my own behavior. Maybe I hadn't handled it the best way. I could have communicated better, opened a door for us to talk, but every time I tried, she shut me down. I had hoped that confronting her like this would make her see things from a different perspective. When I asked her about the possibilities she'd been thinking about, she hesitated for a second before blurting out, I've been thinking about dating other people. I couldn't hold back my response. There are a lot of problems with that idea, starting with the fact that we're both married. She tried to justify it, but other married people do it. They have open marriages. It's supposed to make the relationship stronger. I raised an eyebrow. And who told you that? Who's your source? She named Heather and Roger, claiming that their open marriage had made their relationship better. I couldn't take that seriously. You're seriously buying into that? Let's look it up. She seemed surprised but agreed to sit beside me as I fired up the laptop. I typed in, how many people have open marriages? And clicked the first link. We were both shocked to learn that, according to a survey, less than 1% of Americans have open marriages. I checked a few more links. Same result, less than 1%. Sarah seemed taken aback. Well, that's still a significant number. Like, at least 3 million people. I shook my head. You really think that many people are married, open or not? Let's try something else. I typed in, how many Americans expect their partners to be faithful? The result? Over 95% of Americans expect fidelity in marriage. I looked at her, waiting for her to process it. So, what do you think that means? She shrugged. I guess most people just aren't that open-minded. I always hear about it happening, though, people with alternative lifestyles. I wonder how many of those open marriages end in divorce. I pressed on. I hear you. But listen, I wanted you to know these stats. I typed in, how many open marriages end in divorce? The answer hit me hard. 92% of open marriages end in divorce within 5 years or less. I ran the numbers. Okay, let's break this down. Less than 1% of Americans are in open marriages. Out of 1 million people, that's fewer than 10,000. And 92% of them end in divorce within 5 years. That means 800 out of that 10,000 don't make it. So, out of 1 million people, there are only 800 who don't get divorced. I turned to Sarah. What do you think the odds are for us with those kinds of numbers? She admitted it wasn't looking too good. I leaned in, serious. The marriages that last are the ones where both people are fully on board. You see that? I pointed to the screen. 100% of marriages where one person is pressured into it fail. That's us, because I'm not willing to do this. I could feel the tension rising as I explained how I would feel if we went down this road. I'd feel resentment, jealousy, insecurity, betrayal. It would tear us apart. The only reason I'd consider enduring something so painful and ridiculous would be if I were desperate to hold on to you. But I'm not that desperate, Sarah. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice steady but firm. Other women are attracted to me. I had an encounter last night, actually. If I were a pathetic loser or a sick individual, I might entertain this game you're playing. But I'm not that man. I leaned in, letting the weight of my words sink in. I'd rather you shoot me in the head than break my heart like this. Sarah weakly responded, I don't think everything on the internet is true. I nodded, acknowledging her point. You're right. A lot of it is probably misinformation. But this idea that so many people have open marriages? That's nonsense. You really shouldn't believe everything you hear, especially from someone like Heather. I pressed further, my tone sharpening. You trust Heather, huh? Do you believe everything she tells you? You do know she's been divorced 4 times, right? Sarah's face fell, clearly unaware. I couldn't help but scoff. You're taking marriage advice from a 4-time loser? She didn't take kindly to that. You don't understand. Heather and Roger have a strong marriage. They're fine. I shook my head in disbelief. You're seriously buying this? Tell me the source of all this crap. Heather's been filling your head with nonsense, and you're just swallowing it. She finally admitted that Heather was always talking about open marriages. And Heather and Roger barely talk to each other. I added, my frustration building. They don't even connect, spending all their time trying to find closeness through their friends. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. You're making this sound worse than it is. Worse? How else should I describe it? I asked, exasperated. How do you think this ends, Sarah? You really think an open marriage is the answer? Sarah hesitated before admitting, well, our sex life has been a little stale lately. I immediately disagreed. Stale? I've been perfectly happy with it. The only reason it's gotten weird is because you started playing these games. I couldn't help but bring up the last time. How she climaxed 6 times in one night. Is that from Heather's playbook? Because it sure sounds like it. Her expression said it all. My suspicion was right. It was her idea. Unbelievable, I muttered. A mix of anger and disbelief welling up inside me. We've had a strong marriage. This is a nightmare. A total nightmare. Sarah tried to soften her tone. It could be good, exciting, even. Why not share experiences? I cut her off. Because I don't want to share experiences with anyone else. I'm not sharing my wife with other men, Sarah. That's not something I can ever accept. Her voice rose, as though she was trying to convince me. But men fantasize about this kind of thing, don't they? Why not make it real? I shook my head, the thought of it nauseating. Google it, Sarah. Men don't want to share their women. You're being misled. I paused, staring at her. Let me be clear. Any involvement in this kind of thing would end our relationship. And I mean that. It would be over. I won't be part of your little experiment. Sarah looked shocked. So, does this mean we're through? My heart dropped, but I refused to let her see it. Yes. If that's what it takes to stop this madness, then yes. We're through. She looked deflated, disappointed. You can't be serious. I thought our marriage meant more than this. I echoed her disappointment, my voice quieter, but no less firm. I thought so too. But when you start talking about dating other people and breaking vows, it makes me question everything. You're telling me that our marriage doesn't mean enough to you to even try to work through this. I leaned forward, my voice cold. What would you tell the girls, Sarah? How do you explain to them that their parents might split up? She immediately tried to push back. It's not about that. It's not about not loving you. It's just, I want something different. I cut her off, my anger rising. No, this isn't about me not accepting it. This is about you not loving me enough to keep your vows, to honor your family. You've put your own desires ahead of the well-being of our children. We both fell silent for a moment. The tension in the room was unbearable. Then, Sarah made her move, asserting, it's inevitable. I'm going to do this. I need to explore. I shook my head, refusing to back down. I won't let you destroy this family, Sarah. You can't just walk away and pretend everything's fine. If you follow through with this, I'll consult a lawyer the moment you go through with it. I'll do what I have to. She threw out her own taunt, challenging me. You won't divorce me. You're too afraid of losing everything. Alimony, child support, the house. I stared at her, refusing to show the slightest crack in my resolve. You're wrong. You think this is about fear, but it's not. I won't stand by and watch you destroy us. Think carefully about what you're doing. Despite everything, she tried to approach me. She stood up, came closer, and reached out to embrace me. Come on, let's try it. What's the harm in trying? I pushed her hands away, stepping back. Don't touch me, Sarah. I need to think. The words were a lie. I didn't need time to think. I already knew what I had to do. I needed a strategy, something I could control, something to protect the girls. I left the room, locking myself in the master bedroom. For the next 30 minutes, I pored over finances on my laptop, then made a quick phone call. When I finished, I had a plan, a financial roadmap. But the problem wasn't the money. It was the girls. In Georgia, children over 14 get to choose their custodial parent. I knew Sophia would choose me. She was my daddy's princess. Emily, though, she loved me, but she also had a soft spot for her mother. I hoped to hell Sophia wouldn't side with Sarah. I couldn't imagine splitting them up, but as I lay in bed, my thoughts kept circling back to the same thing. What now? I had to bet on one thing. If I could make the girls aware of Sarah's plans, how she intended to use them as leverage in her scheme for an open marriage, then they'd want nothing to do with her. It was cynical, and I hated every thought I had about it. But I wasn't the one changing the rules here. If Sarah had come to me before we were married and said, I want to stay faithful for 19 years, but then I want to explore relationships with other people, I would have left her immediately. I wouldn't have hesitated. She knew that. She would have done the same if the roles were reversed. She was trying to change the game, force me into compliance, using extortion as her tactic. The conversation finally happened 2 nights later, and Sarah began with a half-hearted apology that I wasn't about to accept. She started talking about therapy, marriage counseling. I asked her straight out, so, you think we need counseling? She denied having any issues. I don't think it's anything serious, she said, quickly shifting the blame to me. You're the one who's closed off, who's planning to be with other men. I couldn't help but point out the contradiction. So, you think I'm the one with issues, but you're the one planning on breaking our vows? She insisted that she wasn't planning anything specific. I'm just saying, if the situation ever comes up, we should have the option. I shook my head. That's not an option. We made vows, Sarah. I could have cheated plenty of times over the years, but I chose to honor our commitment. I resisted because I had a plan for our marriage. I had loyalty in mind. Where's your loyalty? Where's your commitment? She hissed, clearly uncomfortable with where the conversation was heading. But I wasn't backing down. How do you think the girls would see this? What do you think they'll think of their mother's betrayal? Sarah bristled, but I could see her falter, unsure of how to respond. You won't be telling them, I added. Later that day, things escalated. Sarah, now visibly furious, threatened me. I'm the mother. I'll get custody of the kids. You won't see them again. I'll make it impossible for you to even visit. She warned me not to say a word to them about any of this. Her tone was venomous. And then she stormed off, creating enough of a scene for anyone near the stairs to hear a few muffled sobs and gasps. I could feel the tension in the house, thick and suffocating. When I reached the stairs, the girls weren't in the living room. I went to Sophia's empty room first and then headed down the hall to Emily's room. I could hear hushed voices through the door. When I knocked, Emily opened it and I saw both of them, red eyes, swollen from crying. I walked in, sitting between them and pulling them close. I regretted that they had to witness this mess. I'm sorry you had to see that, I told them, but I want you to know, you wouldn't believe me unless you heard it from her yourself. Emily, her voice soft, reassured me, it's not your fault, Dad. We understand. It's Mom. She's the one who's changed. I didn't get it at first, but now I do. Sophia, though, looked like she was still processing it. She shook her head, disbelief written across her face. How could she do this to you, to us? I didn't have a perfect answer. I'm not sure, sweetheart, but I think she's been influenced by some bad ideas. She's made up her mind. She's committed to it. Sophia's brow furrowed with concern. Is she sick, Dad? I mean, what's really going on with her? I sighed. I don't know. I suggested therapy, but she doesn't want it. She's not even interested in trying. At that point, Emily spoke up again. So, what are we supposed to do? I thought for a moment before answering. For now, we do nothing. I'm going to wait until she thinks I've given up. Once she goes on that date, that's when we'll leave. We'll be ready. But I don't think she'll listen to me if I try to talk her out of it. I paused, looking at both of them. Are you with me on this? Or do you want to stay with your mom? Sophia exchanged a glance with Emily before speaking up. No, Dad. We're going with you. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. My girls, had chosen me. After 19 years of disappointment, at least I had their support. It meant everything. For the next 2 months, Sarah and I barely spoke. We became little more than distant roommates, two people living under the same roof who harbored almost no affection for each other. She moved into the spare bedroom, while I kept to the master. There was no warmth between us, no connection. I tried to talk to her, tried to dissuade her from the path she was on, but it was like speaking to a wall. Then, one evening, as we worked in the garden together, I tried again. I asked her, so, how's this working for you? How's this open marriage idea? Is it really making our relationship stronger? Where's the passionate lovemaking you envisioned? Is this exciting for you, like you thought it would be? She glanced at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. It was gone quickly, replaced by a sharp, angry look. It's your fault, she snapped. You're the one who won't cooperate. You won't even consider it, and that's the problem. I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. You're the one who wanted this, Sarah. I never asked for it. I've been loyal, committed to this marriage. You're the one who's trying to tear it apart. She practically shouted, you need to look at the positive side of this. We could make it work, but you're too stuck in your pride to see it. I was done pretending I understood where she was coming from. Perfect? For whom? You? Because this certainly isn't perfect for me. I'm not okay with any of this. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You say you love me more than I love you. But your love for me? I see it differently. If you loved me, you'd respect my boundaries. You'd respect our marriage. Her face crumpled as she heard my words, her eyes filling with tears. I do love you, I swear. My love for you has only grown stronger. I didn't hold back. No, Sarah. Your actions feel like driving a stake through my heart. That's not love. You're hurting me, and you know it. Sarah's fury was palpable. She made her intentions clear that night. announcing she was going to a club with Ethan Blake on Friday. Then, to my shock, she insisted that I join them. "It'll be an exciting experience," she promised. Reluctantly, I agreed. If she was going to go through with it, I figured I might as well go along and see where this would take us. As she rushed across the garden toward me, she wrapped her arms around me, expressing gratitude for my decision to participate. But beneath the surface, I was already filled with regret. The entire situation felt unbearable, and I needed to make sense of it before I completely lost control. I decided to call C. From the moment I shared the plan, it was clear she was furious. "You've got to be kidding me. Mandy invited me to go clubbing with Ethan Blake? I thought I was supposed to be with you." Her voice dripped with disbelief and anger. I reassured her, saying that I needed her help, urgently. "I'm planning to leave, Mandy. I need you to trust me. I need your help getting the girls to my new place and moving our stuff out of the house." C was skeptical, her initial distrust obvious. But after a moment of calming down, I explained my plan. I would pretend to be okay with Sarah's scheme and go along with it, but I needed her to play her part, pretending that she and I were moving things forward. At first, C laughed, questioning whether this was all just a plot to get her into my house, but I admitted she wasn't wrong. "Yeah, you've caught me," I said with a wry smile. "I need your help with the girls and moving our stuff. There's a vengeful aspect to it, I'll admit, but it'll work." Surprisingly, C was intrigued by the idea. She agreed to help, the element of revenge fueling her decision. Throughout the week, Sarah continued her flirtations and closeness moments as though there were no tomorrow. On Friday morning, I emphasized once again how much this wasn't the path I wanted, asking if she was absolutely certain. "Are you sure about this? You can still call it off. We've had a good week together. We could just leave it at that." She was resolute. "No, we'll talk about it after, but I'm sure. Just go with it. It's going to be a great night." She danced her way out of the bedroom, her enthusiasm so misplaced it almost felt like a parody. I thought sourly to myself, right, let's get this day over with. When Lily arrived at the house that evening, I couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between her and Sarah. Sarah was cute, petite, slender, with a youthful face. But Lily? She was in a completely different league. Tall, with curves that demanded attention, and a figure that could have been sculpted. She was wearing a tight, red sequin dress that clung to her in all the right ways. I was dressed in a sport coat, black pants, and a ribbed t-shirt underneath. Lily walked in, and immediately, she teased, "I see you're trying to seduce me tonight." "Huh?" I smirked. "Strictly business tonight, Lily. Let's save that for another time." She let out a playful sigh. "Pity. You know, I'm wearing a thong. Thought you might like it." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Show me then." She laughed and moved closer as I teasingly lifted the hem of her dress. "We better be careful. Sarah could walk in on us at any moment." But I wasn't about to let that stop me. "I'm playing the game," I said. "She has to think I'm with her on this." We shared a brief moment of laughter, but before I could take in the full view, Sarah walked into the room unexpectedly. There was a flicker of surprise, and Lily quickly adjusted her dress. Sarah didn't seem too upset, though. She smiled at us. "Looks like you two started without me." I gave her a playful grin. "Well, maybe you and Ethan should go get a room," I joked. Sarah smirked, picked up her clutch, and we all headed out. At the club, I had no idea what to expect. Ethan met us there, and it didn't take long to see he wasn't as confident as he seemed. I shook his hand, hard. The power in my grip, honed over years of weightlifting, crushed his hand with ease. I could feel him faltering, but he refused to acknowledge it. His macho image wouldn't let him. I couldn't help but notice something about him. He had that pretty boy, too perfect to be real vibe. Something about him screamed hairdresser or Scientologist. Curiously, I asked, "So, are you a hairdresser?" He chuckled nervously and dismissed the idea. "No, man. Hairdressers are mostly gay." I raised an eyebrow and said, "Okay, well, I used to be into Scientology for a few years. Just testing a theory." Lily, who'd heard me joke about this before, nearly choked on her drink. Her attempt to suppress laughter was futile. I glanced at Sarah, who had turned a deep shade of red. It was clear I had crossed a line with my theories, but at this point, the night felt too absurd to care. Lily, trying to save face, suggested we find a booth. As we walked, she had her shoulders stiff with tension, but once Ethan was a safe distance away, she burst into laughter. I joined her, finding the whole situation ridiculous. "You're a mean man, Carter," she said, laughing through her words. "Yeah, well, this is one hell of a night," I replied, my voice low. We reached the booth, and Lily turned on the charm, playing her part to perfection. I couldn't deny that I was thoroughly seduced by the time we reached our seats. After a couple of dances, she moved with an enticing sensuality that left nothing to the imagination. Her body pressed against mine as she performed moves that came dangerously close to intimacy, right there on the dance floor. As Sarah continued to entertain Mr. Ethan during our return, I turned to Lily. "Are you ready for the big show?" I asked, my voice carrying a weight of finality. She looked up at me with wide, radiant brown eyes that made me pause. The expression in her gaze wasn't playful. It was something else, something deeper. There was a quiet intensity behind those eyes, and for a moment, I found myself lost in them. Her lips parted ever so slightly, and I noticed the way her tongue moistened them. Without thinking, I leaned in closer. I had to taste her. It exceeded all my expectations. But before things could go any further, I heard a noise from behind us. Sarah and Ethan slid back into the booth, oblivious to what had just transpired. My stomach sank. "Oh no!" I groaned in my best Saturday Night Live voice. "Look who's back." Lily caught on instantly, and so did Sarah. But Ethan, blissfully unaware, continued to sip his drink. Lily chuckled under her breath. "Don't do anything mean to him," she warned, though I could sense her amusement. Sarah's expression shifted. Her cheeks puffed up in anger, and the smug smirk she'd been wearing evaporated. I glanced at Lily, then back at Sarah. "We're leaving," I said flatly. Sarah didn't argue. Instead, she escorted us to the door, though not without a few parting words. "You've been acting like an idiot tonight," she remarked, a glint of something cold in her voice. I didn't want to engage with her any longer. "I'm not okay," I replied. "You're right. But if you're staying, it's a permanent decision. This thing you're doing, it's not working for me." She seemed to shrug it off, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "This is going to be great for us," she said, almost cheerfully. "You go and enjoy yourself. It'll be awesome, I promise. Don't be an idiot." Her words cut deeper than she realized. I turned to leave, not before throwing one last remark. "Are you planning to spend the night with Mr. Ethan? How's his stamina?" She hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. "Maybe I'll get home around midnight," she said, finally. "We're planning to spice things up." I slapped myself on the forehead. It was all so ridiculous. "Shut up, Sarah. If Lily and I are still engaged when you get back, I'll let you know." She kissed me as though it meant something. It didn't. I didn't kiss her back, and I knew this would be the last one. I stepped out, heading for the car where Lily was waiting. "Are you sure about all this?" Lily asked, her voice softer now. "I mean, after all these years." I sighed, my mind exhausted from the emotional toll of the past few months. "I'm sure. I've run out of energy. It's been one long, drawn-out nightmare. I don't have it in me anymore." Lily seemed surprised at how calm I was. "You don't seem distressed at all." I shrugged. "I've cried enough to fill an ocean. Now, I'm just tired. Sick of it all. I just want it over." We arrived at the house to find the moving truck already loaded. The girls were downstairs, gathering their belongings. They were busy packing clothes into plastic bins, excited to move. As for the furniture, we were only taking what we needed. The beds from the master suite and the girls' rooms, their electronics, and the big screen TV we had replaced 6 months ago. Once the packing was done, she took the girls in her car to our new place. It was far enough from the old house to start fresh, but still in the same school district for their convenience. I took a final look around the empty house, the ghosts of 19 years haunting the silence. The weight of it all hung in the air as I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen table, next to my cell phone. The girls' phones were already there too. It felt like an ending, but not with any grand finale, just a quiet, melancholy departure. 19 years, reduced to a few petty jabs, some cheap shots at Sarah and Mr. Ethan, and the silent realization that things didn't always go the way you planned. Oh well, stuff happens. I locked up and loaded the last of my tools into the truck before driving off. The girls were already excited about the new place. They couldn't wait to explore the backyard pool. I asked Sophia, "Do you like it, baby?" She looked up at me, her face lighting up. "Yeet," she exclaimed. I blinked. "Yeet," I repeated, confused. Sophia grinned. "Yeah, yeet. It's good." I had no idea what yeet meant, but it sounded positive, so I let it go. Lily was there too, looking stunning as always. But honestly, even if she had been Jennifer Lawrence in the flesh, I was just too tired to care. Lily seemed to sense this. With a dazzling smile and a quick peck on my cheek, she was gone. The lingering scent of her perfume was the only reminder she'd been there. I went to bed that night, surprisingly not with the overwhelming anxiety or sadness I had expected. I didn't sleep well, but I did sleep. The next morning, I made coffee. The girls joined me after a while, and we shared Danish Kringle and chocolate milk for breakfast. They watched cartoons while I lounged, trying not to think about what Sarah was doing. She was probably frantic by now, calling everyone she could think of, trying to figure out where we'd gone. She was going to have a hard time finding us. I wasn't working anymore. I had sold the business and done well. The girls weren't in school. It was summer vacation. We weren't going anywhere except the grocery store, and even that felt like an adventure. We walked there or took the bus, a small act of freedom in the midst of it all. The truck sat parked in the garage, and I was certain Sarah had the police out looking for us. But without a car, they were at a disadvantage. The only way she could contact us was electronically, and she did, flooding our inboxes with messages, reaching out to the girls whenever they logged into social media, tweeting, and messaging them on Instagram. We read everything but didn't reply. Let her find us the hard way. I knew it wouldn't take long before Sarah started looking for me in earnest. She had work, bills to pay. I, on the other hand, wasn't paying anything. The reality of her financial situation would hit hard soon enough. We had equity in the house, a lot of it. She didn't want to lose that. About 3 weeks later, I ran into a private detective at the grocery store. He asked me if I was Carter, and when I said yes, he revealed that Sarah had hired him to find me. He threatened to tell her my whereabouts and warned that if I stayed around, I'd be charged with stalking. "Tell her to fuck off," I told him, waving him off. "I'm not reaching out to her." A few days later, the police showed up. Mandy had filed a report claiming I had kidnapped the girls. They came to my door and insisted I go to the station. When I refused, they arrested me. The girls were taken in another car, and I was carted downtown. Sarah was already there when we arrived. She tried to embrace the girls, but they pushed her away. I watched as they did, a mixture of sadness and resolve in their eyes. A woman officer took them into another room, while I was ushered into a separate one. The cops didn't waste any time. They started questioning me aggressively. I showed them my ID and said nothing else. I informed them that I was exercising my right to remain silent and that I wanted to speak to my attorney. The room went quiet, and I overheard one officer muttering something about me, lawyering up. They handed me a phone, and I called Mark Simmons. He arrived within 45 minutes, just as we'd arranged. It took 3 hours to sort everything out. During that time, the girls made it clear that they were with me willingly, denying any kidnapping accusations. They refused to speak to Sarah. Mark handled it from there. He pointed out the lack of a custody order and explained Georgia law, which recognized both parents as equal custodians, especially with children over 14, who were allowed to choose where they wanted to live. There was nothing Sarah could do. They had no choice but to let us go. Lily walked out with us, and Sarah trailed behind, sobbing, desperately pleading with the girls to talk to her. But they ignored her. They climbed into Lily's car and drove off, leaving us standing there alone. Sarah collapsed in a heap, crying uncontrollably. She turned her tear-streaked face toward me and fell to her knees. "Please," she sobbed, her voice cracking, "don't do this to me. I made a mistake. Please come home. We can fix this." I stood there, unmoved. "I begged you not to mess around with Ethan, Mandy," I said, my voice cold. "But you didn't listen. So why should I?" She continued to plead, but I had no sympathy left for her. Where do you want to go? I asked, uninterested in her pleas. Home, she whispered, wiping her eyes. I don't want anyone to see me like this. I shook my head. I'm not going back to your home. I wasn't even sure who she'd been seeing there. I'll go to mine. You can come with me. Her face twisted in sorrow, but she agreed with a resigned nod. Okay, Carter. Whatever you want. But it's your home too. I didn't argue. She suggested that I ride with her, but I declined, opting to call a cab. She followed me to my house, knowing the girls were staying with Lily for the night. Once we were inside, I offered her coffee. We sat at the bar, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. It hadn't been this awkward since our third date, but now it felt like a chasm between us. After a long stretch of silence, she finally spoke, her voice small. What do you want, Carter? I looked at her, deadpan. What makes you think I want anything from you? She winced, then pressed on, more urgently. What do I need to do to get you to come home? To see the girls again? I leaned back in my chair. I have no control over that. It's up to them. She flinched at my words. You're poisoning them against me. Heather must have told you everything, didn't she? Her tone was accusatory. I raised an eyebrow. Heather's the oracle of all wisdom now? I let the question hang in the air, but she didn't answer. I took a breath before responding. I didn't say a word to the girls about you. All I told them was that I was leaving, and they needed to decide who they wanted to live with. I let that sink in for a moment. The funny thing is, though, who do you think told them? It was you, Mandy. Her face shifted from confusion to realization. What? When did I? The night you threatened me. You said those things about me in the living room, and the girls were sitting on the stairs, listening, I said, my voice flat. That's when they heard it. Her face went white, and her sobs started again, raw and uncontrolled. She couldn't speak anymore. I just watched her. The girls believe you poisoned their perception of things. And honestly, I believe it too. Her pleading was pitiful now, and it reminded me of my own helplessness not long ago. But I was done. I don't care about this anymore, Mandy, I said, my voice callous. You ruined it with the girls. You messed it all up. You're the one who needs to fix it, not me. She wiped her eyes, trying to pull herself together. What about me? What can I do with you? Her voice was desperate now. File for divorce, I said without hesitation. That's what you need to do. Her eyes widened. I don't want a divorce, she whispered. I just want you to come home. Please, Carter, please. I stood up, shaking my head. I'm already home, but it's not with you. She looked defeated, her shoulders slumping. It was a mistake, she murmured. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, just forgive me. I met her gaze, my expression hard. It's not about forgiveness, Mandy. It's about you wanting to fix this. You made your choices. Now you have to deal with them. I demanded Sarah file for divorce, warning her that if she didn't take action within a few months, I would initiate the process myself. I made it clear that our relationship was beyond repair, and I had no interest in reconciling. Anger flared in her eyes. You're a fool, she spat. You took all our money, sold the business, and emptied our accounts. I didn't flinch. I defended my actions, explaining that I'd sold the business at a loss and had taken only the money I had earned. I was clear. Nothing was left. But the truth, unspoken, was that I had stashed the money away in an offshore account, realizing how crucial it was to secure that before the divorce began. The records would show I'd sold the business to a Danish company for far less than what I owed in taxes. I had intentionally overpaid the IRS, with the excess funds set aside to cover future tax liabilities. Our brokerage accounts remained untouched, though I knew I'd have to relinquish half of them in the divorce. I'd also set up a trust for the girls, ensuring they would be financially secure for the next 3 months at least. I had my strategy, and part of it involved frequenting local stores, grocery stores, Walmarts, convenience stores, where I'd always request cash back when prompted by the machines. A little over $1.50 here, $1.80 there. It didn't seem like much, but it added up quickly. I had a small team working with me, and I kept it all above board. I was slowly gathering a significant sum, which I kept hidden away in an old chest at a storage unit. Turning back to Sarah, I offered her the house. The equity's enough for you to sell and clear the mortgage. That should buy you some time. I paused, adding, after you sell it, you might consider moving in with Mr. Ethan. Wonder how his wife would feel about that. Sarah's eyes widened. What are you talking about? I scoffed. You didn't know he was married? Your open marriage should have told you enough. She gasped, indignantly, but I didn't let up. You don't care about his marital status, do you? Go ahead and move on, but file for the divorce. Now. I stood, heading toward the door, but she trailed behind, visibly distressed. She wrung her hands and cried, her voice desperate. Please tell the girls I love them, and that I'm sorry. I nodded. I'll tell them, but don't expect me to give up on this. Her eyes, filled with tears, met mine. Carter, I know I messed up, but I still love you. I want us to work. Her pleading didn't reach me. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I walked her to the door, not saying another word. Once she left, I took a moment to breathe and called Lily. She brought the girls home, but she didn't come inside. Sophia and Emily were still angry, more so than before. It seemed they couldn't get enough of telling their mother how much she'd hurt them. I knew they wouldn't be receptive to Sarah's message, so I decided to hold off on delivering it for now. 2 days later, Sarah showed up, about 4:30 in the afternoon. She had dinner, chicken tetrazzini with French-cut green beans and garlic bread, a sad attempt to mend fences. Emily answered the door, and Sarah immediately went in for a hug. Emily stiff-armed her. Baby, Sarah said to me, I'm so sorry. I miss you. Please, I want to fix this. But Emily cut her off. Stay away, she said, voice firm and resolute. Sarah looked like she'd been physically struck, her whole body sagging. She almost collapsed, and I quickly took the food from her. I led her to the sofa, where she buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I'm hated, she whispered through her tears. I nodded, acknowledging the truth. What you did to the girls was awful. I don't know if they'll ever trust you again. Despite the sympathy I felt, I couldn't let her off the hook. Rebuilding your relationship with them is your responsibility, not mine, not theirs. She looked up at me, almost pleading. I made dinner. I just want to make things right. She looked at me like I held the answer to all her pain, but I only saw her responsibility. I'll talk to the girls. You go ahead and clean up. I'll do what I can. Upstairs, the girls were furious. Sophia was almost shaking with rage. She thinks making dinner is going to fix this? She destroyed our family. I sat with them, listening. I understood their anger. Sarah threw the grenade, I said, and now she's got to deal with the fallout. I reassured them, despite everything. I love you both. Nothing's going to change that. You can stay with me, or you can go with your mother. It's your choice. Emily, scowling, spoke with as much venom as a person could muster. I'd rather hang myself than eat dinner with her. I nodded. I understand, but I want you to try to be civil, just for the sake of peace. They agreed, though their faces said they were doing it only because I asked. Dinner was awkward. Sarah tried to spark conversation, but the girls barely responded. After the meal, we cleaned up. I packed her dishes into a bag, and she began preparing to leave. When she asked Sophia for a hug, Sophia simply shook her head. You're not my mother anymore. The girls retreated to their rooms, silent. Sarah stood there for a while, utterly devastated. It took her about 30 minutes to compose herself enough to leave. I watched it all from the kitchen, my heart unmoving. Pity for her crossed my mind, but I took no responsibility for the situation. She had done this to herself, and it felt good to see her squirm. She continued to visit once a week for the next few months, but the girls continued to shut her out. Every time she came over, they made sure she knew how little she was wanted. 6 months later, I filed for divorce. When it was final, Sarah seemed to accept the truth. We were done. The court granted her visitation rights, but it was clear that every time she wanted to visit, something would come up to prevent it. I hoped she found someone who suited her open lifestyle. I sure had. As for me, I remained unmarried, my life focused entirely on my girls.